Indianapolis Center, do you have any test operation to restricted area 2508?
Aries 31, roger. Traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some non-ballistic motion, over.
Roger, Aries 31. Continue to send at your discretion, over.
Okay, Center. The traffic is approaching head-on, ultra bright, and really moving. And right by us, right now.
There are 1,000 UFO sightings reported around the world every month. 90% of these sightings can be explained, but 10% cannot. Officially and unofficially, the U.S. military has been investigating UFOs since 1947. Their top secret goal is to find out what's behind these unexplained sightings. The Pentagon classifies them as unusual airborne anomalies, but a better term is X-Files. Join us now as Mack, Wanwan, and Commander Cobra explore these unsolved cases, UFO incidents that baffle even the U.S. military. This is Mack Maloney's Military X-Files. And now, here's Mack Maloney.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Mack Maloney's Military X-Files show here on the Distant Thunder Radio Network. This is Mack Maloney. What a show we have for you tonight. But let me first introduce you to the members of the posse. Girls, it's that time. Sit yourselves down, get your fans going, get your misters ready, get that big box of Kleenex and that extra big box of wipes because the very famous, I can hardly say it, Wani, the very famous Wan is here.
Hello, Mac. Hello, girls, especially. Welcome to the show tonight. It's going to be a great one. Mac, it's good to be here as always. Pleasure to see you, hear you, and,
good to be anywhere.
Share this. Good to be anywhere, as my man Keith Richards always says. Yes.
Speaking of being nowhere, sorry, middle-aged ladies, Coco is still on his secret mission. He might be joining us later on in flight, as he might say. But all your grandmas might be happy to know that national correspondent Switchblade Steve Waters is switching up in Battle Creek, Michigan.
Well, I am dynamite with the over 80 crowd. Great to be here, Mac.
Right, good for you. And how are you?
I'm beyond wonderful.
Okay, super duper. Good to be consistent. Okay, let's go to the beauty among the beasts. Joining us up in upstate New York somewhere, our favorite good witch, Raven. Raven, how are you tonight?
Hello, my friends. I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a bun night. Is it a bun night?
It's a bun night. It's like 95,000 degrees here, and everything is humid and giant, and I don't know what to do.
Okay. All right.
I hear you.
A bun to the rescue.
I've been sleeping in the nude the last couple of nights, so get a load of that.
That's enough. Where's my thing? Where's my rim shot?
Mark the minute there, you'll want to edit that part, I think.
Yeah, really.
Let me mark the tape.
Okay. Let's move further up the totem pole. Joining us is our security chief, the guy who's looking in on us all the time, even though we don't always see him, Willy Clubb in beautiful Methuen, Mass.
Hey, Mac. Hi, folks. Great to be here.
Hey, Clubb.
You've never said that before, moving up the totem pole.
I didn't know what else to say. I didn't want to say moving down.
I took that as a positive, Mac. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like a good night tonight. I feel good about it.
Okay. All right. Everything good with you? You look fit?
Yeah, wonderful.
He always looks fit.
Wonderful.
He looks amazing.
Oh, wow.
Methuen?
Okay. Lawrenceville.
Did you say
Mass. Yep.
Methuen? It sounds like some kind of a adult drug or something like that.
What's that?
I mean, Methuen?
Methuen, like Prozac.
You don't know your Indian tribes? It's the Methuen tribe?
No, I guess not.
Well, we have a lot of them here in this part of the country. So
I just insulted all the Native Americans. My apologies.
Probably.
That's
so
okay.
I wouldn't go out for a couple of days.
So
Okay.
don't go to Lawrence.
I'm going to head west of the Mississippi, I think.
Don't go to Lawrence or Methuen. You'll be okay. That's where most of those Methuen Indians hang out, in Lawrence. Anyway, someone who may know where Lawrence is because he's in Massachusetts.
Right next to Haverhill.
In the South Shore of Boston, where all the rich people live.
Oh, man.
Jim Hamilton, down in Marshfield, Mass. Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good to see you, Jim.
The Irish Riviera.
Yeah, loving it. It's good beach weather, but not good for much else.
Yeah, right. Have you been down to the beach? Is Duxbury Beach open yet?
You mean because of the plovers? Yeah.
Right.
We usually go to Green Harbor Beach and then walk down towards Duxbury Beach. So
right.
If you're talking about the rich side of the South Shore, it's Duxbury, not exactly Marshfield.
Okay, all right.
So they keep an eye on the plovers there too, huh?
People. Yeah, I've heard jokes about people stop in Marshfield, do something before they go to Duxbury. It has to do with men's and ladies' rooms, but we won't get into that.
What?
Okay.
I used to go to the Rexicana Ballroom.
Oh yeah, the Rexicana. Boy, that's going back a ways.
Yeah, a couple of years.
That's when Frank Sinatra was highlighting it.
All right. So, okay. So we're going to have an interesting show tonight. Jim is someone who can give us, information on maybe how to survive an airplane crash, which would be useful information if you happen to be in the middle of an airplane crash. But he's also an expert on, how people have survived airplane crashes and survived air disasters. So we're going to be talking to him about that. Wow, there's a crack of thunder here. This should be interesting. And also, coming up in a little while, we'll be talking to Thom Reed, who is someone who is really on top of an incident that people know as the Berkshires UFO, which is in the western part of Massachusetts. A lot of strange activity out there to the point where there's actually a monument at a park out there where lots of people saw this certain UFO. And he's been on a lot of TV shows, radio shows, and everything. This is his first visit with us, so that should be good. Thom Reed will be joining us later on in the show. So what's interesting is that we have no bits tonight, Raven. We have no top 10. We have nothing funny to talk about.
I mean, I have a segment. It's not like
what is it?
Well, so I'm redoing my house, and I found, because I was a freaky little kid, my pop-up mummy book. Really a mummy book for kids, and it's a pop-up. Yes. And I saw this, and I'm like, I forgot what a strange child I was. And
remind us.
The best book ever. And I have several books on mummies that I used to bring in to class, and I was asked to not bring them in because I scared the other children. Losers.
Really? Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, I'll say. Who wouldn't want to know about mummies?
Mummies are cool.
Let me ask you. So you're a mummy expert. Let me ask you. What have they ever discovered? Because I've always heard that the solution, when they would wrap the mummy and they would put some kind of solution all over the bandages to preserve them. Have they ever figured out what that was? Because
I think there's theories, but I don't think it's like ever officially been like figured out. I'd have to go back and do some research. I'm no expert. I'm an enthusiast on people that have passed away and were wrapped in paper towels. So
I have a question for Raven.
Go ahead.
Raven, were the other children aware that mummies don't actually come to life?
Oh, I doubt it.
Okay.
I mean, come on. They were afraid of them. They probably thought, like, they watched one episode of Scooby-Doo and they were like, oh my God. And it's like,
Abbott and Costello was chased by a mummy too.
Yes. Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, I think, had every monster movie, every monster
they
from
did,
all those.
They took advantage of every Universal monster, horror movie monster,
right,
and milked it to death.
Yeah, that was funny.
So yeah,
Hey, listen,
that's my little bit. I had to bring it up.
Coming in hot, it looks like Commander Cobra is joining us. Coco, are you there?
I am. Good evening. Sorry about that. I was waiting to join you. I do like to add one small remark about the mummy concoction, a paranormal event that I experienced a number of years back in the cemetery on the Malden-Melrose line of the great state and Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Centers on a doctor/embalmer undertaker who experimented in trying to find out what it was that they had done with the embalming techniques of the Egyptians. Never been truly formed. There's a number of schools of thought along the way about what that technique was. Pretty gross when you talk about the taking out the brains through the nose to prepare the body and the other organs that were put into containers. for the preservation. Of course, and the Egyptians being Egyptians, leaving money as well as other important things to have for the afterlife. I was hoping that you could just go, all debit card when you checked into the next part, but I guess not. Gold is still king, both sides of the line, I guess.
Yeah, very
great to see you all. Good evening. Sorry that I was a little bit late. Like I said, I was being blocked in the green room.
Oh,
royalty always arrives late, doesn't it?
Blame it on me.
There you go.
I might have been asleep at a switch. I apologize.
The pyramids themselves, they've really never really figured out what they were about, but it looks like they were, burial grounds. I mean, they were like, the place where only one person was buried in them. The pharaoh or the top guy.
The mathematics that is behind the pyramids. The mathematics behind the pyramids is absolutely insane.
It's mind-boggling.
Where you find things like pi showing up, the right angles, and the scale of the size of the pyramids to other things that are happening astronomically as well as geographically on the planet. Crazy stuff. Absolutely crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And then when you ask, how did they move those stones?
Right.
That's the other part that, how were those stones placed and put into position?
Right, yeah. And thousands of years ago. I mean, one of the Egyptian kingdoms, if we can time it this way, one of the Egyptian kingdoms happened 2,500 years before the birth of Christ. Think of that. When Christ was walking around, the ancient Egyptians had already been around 2,500 years. That's
and
almost, almost
and completely gone and changed.
Come and gone, yeah.
There's also a UFO connection there too. There's a lot of belief about the whole thing with the pyramids and UFOs and.
Right now, yeah.
It's crazy.
So anyway, well, thank you. So we know that Raven is a big Mummy fan too,
and was a creepy kid in a good way.
Obviously, I was a creepy kid.
I always like that song by Steve Martin, King Tut.
Hey, Raven, what's on fire? Is that incense that's behind you?
No, my room's on fire tonight.
Okay, just want to let you know. The show's hot, and you're bringing the heat.
I'm keeping an eye on it. It's pretty low right now.
She didn't start the fire.
Listen, now that we have a little bit of time here, let's go to the part of our show that people listen to the most. It has to do with Switchy. Switchy, what did you have for breakfast this morning? And I'm hoping it's going to be good.
Mac, I just had the old standard. I had sugar frosted flakes. I know.
Do you put extra sugar on your sugar frosted flakes?
At least it wasn't an energy bar.
That's true.
I mean, count your blessings. I will do my utmost next week to do something a little more interesting, a little more titillating, shall we say, for the breakfast segment.
What did he say?
I don't think we can use that word on the air, but okay.
Let me mark the tape.
We can't say titillating? Okay.
Well, now you said it twice. Okay, it's just that it's a little.
You seem to be making like a big memory out of the whole discussion here. What's going on?
Now listen.
Well, speaking of 8 Mile Road, they used to have signs about that kind of thing up on the going down 8 Mile.
Really?
About titillation on 8 Mile Road?
Titillating review.
Titillating review. Gotcha.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
It's true.
Well, whatever.
I never actually went inside. I just saw the sign.
Yeah, I'll bet. Okay.
Friend of
All
mine.
right, if that's your story, sticking to it then.
Okay.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we go right to our first guest, our good friend Jim Hamilton, Marshall, Mass. Jim, thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure.
You were on a segment earlier that has yet to air. We're still trying to figure out all the technical problems that were involved. Things started to go wrong when we had Raven's father on as a surprise visit. And then after that, the electronics went all screwy. And we got it at Apple trying to decipher it. So at some point that will come on. But anyway, in that segment we talked about, you have written extensively on people who have survived air disasters. Is that putting it right?
Well, particularly long falls related to them. So people who have fallen tens of thousands of feet and survive without a working parachute. Most folks have heard about Vesna Vulovic, a stewardess who was in an airplane that blew up at great height and fell. Guinness Book of World Records length and survived, other folks like that. And a lot of these folks tend to be sole survivors of aircraft, which is our topic tonight. So there's a bit of overlap there because some people just survive a plane crash when it hits the ground, but some of these planes blew up in midair and somehow someone miraculously survived a long, long fall because they came down in wreckage or landed in a swamp or came through trees or some other factor helped break their fall a little bit and they survived.
Right. Just remind us of that one incident we talked about earlier where there were two airmen on an airplane that was shot down in World War II. One had a parachute, one didn't, and they ran into each other in midair, right?
Exactly. One was the pilot, and he gave the bailout command. One of his gunners jumped out, and the plane blew up before he had a chance to put on his parachute and jump out himself. So he found himself flying through midair and actually latched on to the other airman in midair, grabbed onto his legs. And, you know, the thing about those kinds of incidents, there are a number of times when somebody's in a burning plane, there's one parachute and the two guys decide to come down together and one holds on to the other. Well, typically when the parachute opens, the person who is not harnessed in falls off and falls to their death. And it's tragic. Some odd combination of factors. I think the fact maybe that the parachute was just beginning to open, the guy was swinging in the right direction, and he came in and grabbed onto his legs, and you know he was holding on for dear life for like 3 or 4 minutes while they're coming down under that parachute. The guy who he grabbed onto, I think, had a broken leg. So it was even kind of tough for the guy who was being held onto. But luckily the pilot, who hit the ground first, kind of broke the fall for all of them. And so both of them survived. I mean, totally amazing incident.
What's the luck? I mean, the chances are astronomical, but what luck that you run into someone in midair and you share a parachute successfully all the way down. It's
just, well, you know, you think about it. If you have a world war and there are airmen and tens of thousands of them are blown up in midair and come down, to me it seems like some percentage of them, let's say it's 0.05, are going to have something miraculous happen. They're going to find somebody in midair. They're going to come down through trees and land in snow on bushes and survive. They're going to hit the skylight of a train station and somehow bounce off angles. Doctor finds them immediately and they survive. You know, it's just amazing. And then, you know, there are plenty of other incidents that happened outside of wartime too. But really, World War II was the test case for these kinds of things. Yeah,
I'll bet. So, all right, let's talk about how to survive a crash. Is that what we're going to talk about, kind of?
Well, I can give you 3 suggestions if you like.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's going to be entirely helpful for your listening audience. But number 1 is if you look at the list of all of these sole survivor incidents, the absolute youngest was 14 months old and the oldest was 52. So it certainly pays to be young. Okay. Now, that's not exactly a choice you can make if you're climbing onto an airplane. And I don't think there's anything that I can tell you about, you know, like sit in this section of the airplane or you know, go to the back or pay attention to this or that. Because, you know, these sole survivors, I haven't seen a pattern that would tell me, you know, you should always be there or not.
Right.
But number 1 piece of advice would be don't be any older than 52.
Okay.
I'll keep that in mind.
Well, that leaves everyone the Raven out.
The Raven, you are all set here. We're all sunk. Number 2 here.
She just turned 21 just the other day, so she's good.
I just turned 21, literally.
Yeah, right. So you're good to go for a long time.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, do you know, does that have anything to do with older people having heart attacks or something coming down? Do they?
You know, people wonder if that's the case. You know, people have asked me if someone was falling in midair without a parachute, would they have a heart attack? And I'd say probably not. I mean, skydivers fall in midair. They know they have a parachute, but they're falling in midair, and it's not the falling that makes them have a heart attack. So I don't really think that's it. I think there's a lot to say about, you know, resiliency and youth and vitality, and those things tend to be a little less in evidence as you get older. So sorry for that bummer, but that's kind of it. The other thing that I would add here is that before you climb onto an airplane, you should definitely pay attention to who the airline is and what their safety record.
Yeah.
As far as far as sole survivors, we'll get back to Kwanzaa and the movie references. But as far as sole survivors go, there is one airline that has had three crashes, and sole survivors in each one of them, and that is Lanza, which is a South American airline, which God bless us all, I do not believe exists anymore.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's done.
That's a pretty poor flight record. I mean, just to have three crashes, but the fact that there's sole survivors from three of their crashes, honestly, I don't know how many other crashes they had. The joke in Spanish was that Lanza lands on its belly, and that that line rhymes in Spanish if you say it that way. But yeah, avoid Lanza. And Lanza, in fact, was responsible for the story of Juliana Köpke. And if you maybe saw the movie or the documentary by Werner Herzog, she is the one who was in an airliner on a Christmas Eve, 1971, I think it was, that was struck by lightning and broke up in midair. The contents of the plane fell into the Peruvian rainforest. She survived. And that was really just the beginning of her ordeal. She walked out of the rainforest to safety. She had been told by her father that, if you ever get into this trouble, she was very experienced with the jungle, in fact, because her father and mother were both, I believe, ornithologists. But he had told her, if you get in a situation like this, find a little brook, follow it to a stream, it's going to lead to a river, and a river is going to lead to civilization. And that's what she did. It took her like 10 or 11 days to walk out. But she was the sole survivor, and Lanza was her airline. Her father had warned her not to get onto a Lanza aircraft, but her mother and she had bought tickets anyway because it was the only way they were going to be able to get home for Christmas.
Wow, man, oh man. So follow a stream that will turn into a river, and the river will lead you eventually to civilization.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice for us all, although, again, if you're going to get dropped out of an airplane and be the sole survivor, hopefully someone's going to be there to find you quickly.
Yeah, right. Wow, that's interesting.
Do you
Someone
think the
also
odds...
told me... Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, another thing, do you think the odds are better, say you're over the ocean, and rather than landing on a hard ground, if you fall out and you're in the ocean, maybe 100 miles deep or something. Do you know on some of these people that survived, were they related to, ocean crashes or anything like that?
Water is not necessarily a good thing to fall into. I found a lot of accounts and only very few where water has been a contributing factor. And part of the problem is that you hit the water, you may well be knocked unconscious. And if that's the case, unless you're wearing a life jacket, you're going to drown. And the great quote that I heard at one point from someone was that water is basically, landing on water is basically like landing on concrete, except concrete won't then open up and swallow you.
There you go. Take your pick, right? Wow. So, but we talked about earlier too, is that you said sometimes people actually hit like the side of a mountain, a snowy mountain, and have survived, right? Going down like almost like a ski slope or something.
Yeah, sliding down a slope like that. I think that helped Vesna Vulovic, although she wasn't. She was inside the center portion of the fuselage, and that hit on a slope and slid down. There's this guy, Nicholas Alcamaidi. He fell into trees and bushes and snow, and that all helped. There's a Russian guy from World War II who was probably the best example of sliding into a hillside. He had, Germans had been attacking his plane, shot him down. He parachuted out. We had a parachute, but he didn't pull it because he was worried that if he was hanging there in midair, the Germans would come by and shoot him. He passed out, never got a chance to pull his ripcord, and woke up, rolling down a snowy hill, basically. So that can help. Water is not, mud, freshly plowed fields, haystacks, trees. Those are all good things. Water in general, if it's, is not a good thing. If you have a failed parachute above you, that tends to orient you in the direction with your feet down. And then if you go into water, it's a little bit more survivable. That means you still have to have a failed parachute above you. And there have been examples of that, particularly U.S. Navy guys who were in situations like that, where their parachutes failed and they went into water and managed to survive. But again, that's the exception rather than the rule.
How about if you hit a pillow factory? One work in a pillow factory. How about if you hit a pillow factory? You
know what you could actually, a cardboard box factory might be a good thing, because there is a really nice video of a guy who's a wingsuit guy. So there are fake wingsuit videos where you see this guy coming down and he lands on a lake and he survives. It's fake. You when you're on a wingsuit, you need a parachute to land. But one guy decided that, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to set up essentially this mountain of cardboard boxes. I'm going to jump out of a helicopter, and I'm going to do really kind of a swan dive into these cardboard boxes. And he did that and survived. So Pillow Factory would probably work, but he had a choice of what to stack up there. And he chose cardboard boxes because he just felt, again, it would collapse and collapse and collapse and collapse. And ultimately it would not be a fatal connection with the ground.
Right. So when you see those wing guys, those wingsuit guys, I see videos of them. I can't believe it. They're jumping off the Alps and all that stuff. Lots of maneuverability on the way down, but you always have to have a parachute. You're not going to land like Superman.
No. I mean, if you could manage to, do the old Superman swoop up and land on your feet, that'd be nice. Right. But gravity and, forward motion and stuff like that don't quite work that way.
It brings up this question. We've talked about it on the show before. On the old Superman series, Switcher, you would know this. So you'd see Superman flying, okay? But he'd always come into the room feet first, right? Come into the room feet first. What kind of maneuver does Superman have to do when he's speeding along head first and he's got to stop? And you know what I mean? It seems aerodynamically impossible.
I don't want to step over a switch, but it's a half Lumshavak.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to hear more about that. What's a half Lumshavak?
It's a maneuver where you alternate the nose and the tail of the aircraft. And in the case of Superman, as we come up to the window, much like a common housefly, if you ever watch a common housefly, when it goes up to the ceiling, it's going to park on the ceiling, it'll go up, it'll execute a half a loop and a half a roll, and then fly into the ceiling and then attach itself to the ceiling. Similar thing that
I've actually observed that
Superman is doing, because he has to work through these, perform that stall maneuver. Right. But he's not actually generating lift. He's using an anti-gravity because he comes from a place where there's not kryptonite here that allows him to have those powers to defy gravity.
Right. Actually, George Reeves just jumped off a ladder off camera.
Is that what he did? Yeah. Yep. Wow.
Thank you, Captain Buzzkill. So glad that you joined us tonight.
You just revealed my secret identity. Thank you, Cobra.
There you go.
Cobra, question for you as a pilot. Did you, in your training, did they include anything about what Jim talks about, survivability of a crash?
Yep.
So there are techniques and things that you learned?
Well, I happened to go to parachute school when I was a cadet. So I signed up for that because I really wanted to go to parachute school. So I did that. You spend a lot of time learning how to transfer the energy when you make the impact to the ground. It's called a PLF, parachute landing fall. And you practice that over and over and over again. And I can remember one incident where one of the instructors really, really wound up. It was a very hot afternoon in Georgia, and he fell out of the 30-foot tower that we were doing our first practice jumps. You wear a harness and you go out. He didn't have his on. He fell out. He landed. He did a perfect PLF, which they had been drilling us on the ground in front of us, stood up, yelled airborne, and the rest of us just started doing push-ups because we knew his screw-up meant that we had to do push-ups. And we're going, this is unbelievable. This guy didn't get himself hurt. And he was probably right smack in the middle. He was probably in his 30s when he pulled that off, in great shape. Going into the water, we spent a lot of time on the naval side of things talking about that. In the old days, they used to talk about these crazy things about when you thought you were about 10 feet over the surface of the water, detached from your parachute. Because a lot of times if you came down, the parachute would come down on top of you. You can get tangled up in the lines. The parachute will sink. And it can be very, very frightening as the material gets with water and starts to sink down. So you spent time in a pool where they practiced just dropping you in a pool from a few feet above, and you had to climb out from underneath the chute, get out of your harness, and climb out from underneath your chute. That led to a couple very tragic deaths that occurred. Successful parachute exit from the airplane, coming down the parachute, the latest technique that I was taught, and it's probably changed since then. As you came down to the water, you put your arm across your chest to grab the harness. You detached your harness fitting. Then you detached one of your leg fittings. So all you had to do was do one leg fitting as you enter the water, and you could get away from your chute very quickly. And we lost a pilot who was very worried about it. Wasn't a good swimmer, and he was very worried about it. And what they theorized what he did is that he undid his chest his clip there early and fell forward out of the chute, and then right out of the harness was just his legs, and he hit with a helmet head first. But as Jim was saying, even with that short distance of about 50 to 75 feet above the water where this occurred, he hit with the force of hitting concrete, and that impact killed him even with the helmet on. So yeah, you spent a lot of time talking about water survival. And then, depending on where you are, like the Persian Gulf, where I spent a lot of time looking over the side of the boat before flying, I don't think we would go 10 feet without seeing sea serpents, which were highly poisonous. They were everywhere. They're this bright yellow color. They're everywhere. So you survive, the ejection, the bailout, however you got out of the aircraft. Now you get to the water, you successfully get out of the harness, and now you're surrounded by pissed off reptiles that have venom that's really... or the sharks show up. So, good times. Good times all the way around.
Yeah, I remember a story. There was the band Lynyrd Skynyrd. Remember them?
Oh yeah.
They were in a plane crash, and a number of them got killed, but 2 or 3 of them survived. And the guy survived. I think they crashed in a swamp. To tell you
yes, they did.
And he survived, and he crawled to like the nearest place, which was a farm, and the farmer shot him. Okay, so he thought he was an intruder or something. So he survives a plane crash, only to get shot. But anyway, so Jim, let's talk about what we were going to talk about tonight. So we've said, I guess, that the old wives' tale, if I can use that, is if you sit over the wing, your chances are better of surviving. And I've also heard if you sit at the back, your chances are better. But that's really not true, right? Neither of those?
Well, I can't say really whether that's true or not because, maybe in incidents where there were multiple survivors, there were, situations where being in one of those spots made a difference. But honestly, the sole survivor, one good place for a survivor was in the lavatory. So there was an incident in a Russian military plane where it collided with another aircraft, came down, and I think it was on approach to landing, so it was not really very high. And the only survivor was someone who was in the lavatory. He crashed, and then he called his wife on a cell phone to say that he was okay.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well,
so I'm not suggesting people go into the lavatory, but that's a pretty interesting story. And he was a sole survivor.
Yeah. And we want to make sure that we get the message out clearly that Mack Maloney's Military X-Files, Jim Hamilton is not endorsing following the going to lavatory on landing, which is prohibited by the federal regulations in the United States. So if you are in trouble and yelling out our names will not help you. In fact, will probably hurt you in your defense later on. So just stay in your chair.
Get a lot of crap for that.
And keep your belt low and tight. That's what I would tell you.
Okay. I do have one more piece of advice, though, in another unusual sole survivor kind of incident, which would be to keep an eye on what people have in their carry-on luggage. So,
what do you mean, like a bomb or something?
Well, that could
be.
be.
You're a good time. Jesus, Clubb, you are really, you're on fire tonight. I thought, David had the fire, but you're bringing the heat and the smoke.
Pillows.
Good times
maybe.
with you. Whitey, my goodness.
Go ahead.
Is that a bomb in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me, Barry?
Okay, listen, that's a stick of dynamite, but okay.
But here we go. So
Go ahead.
it's in Africa. I think this was the Republic of the Congo, 2010. Twin engine plane, 20 people on board, including the pilots. They're coming in to land, at the end of their short flight, and someone had brought a crocodile in their carry-on luggage, and it got loose.
What?
Oh man.
What? Why is that?
How do you hide that?
So they were
It's just luggage waiting to be turned into luggage. Why are you guys like this? How can you be so judgmental? I mean, I'm
Gators
sure
on
you
a
guys are
plane.
against taking live poultry in the overhead. Listen to this.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, but if I was to stuff a child in the overhead, David
that'd
would
be
say,
wrong.
"Oh, that's okay," because Mrs. Cobra would say that's okay too.
Well, he can take a nap.
So I think the guy was smuggling it and intended to sell it when he got to his final location. Unfortunately, what happened was it went after one of the flight attendants. The flight attendant ran to the front of the plane. Everybody else on the plane ran to the front of the plane, and the plane became unbalanced and crashed.
Whoa, wow.
Now,
How
they
big of
would
a
not have
plane?
known what happened here, or maybe somebody might have figured it out, except there was a sole survivor who was able to describe the story. And the final thing I would like to say is that the alligator actually did survive the crash. And it wasn't the alligator who told the story. A human being actually did survive.
So it wasn't a sole survivor incident. This was two entities survived.
Not very long after the crash, the crocodile was killed with machetes.
Listen,
Oh, man.
survive the crash,
Why?
you're a survivor. You can't clear customs, and you have problems with the
That's
locals.
true, you're
That's a different situation.
Wow.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Club,
This is not a sole
Club, you
survivor
need to weigh in here,
situation.
Club. Explain to them that the crocodile survived. It's a tubie.
To be.
No, I just don't understand that. That poor crocodile, they deserve to live after going
Yeah, you
through all
would
that.
think.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's great. Imagine talking to the guy, the survivor, and they say, "What happened?" He says, "Well, it all started when this crocodile got loose on the plane,
I
and
don't
everyone
think
ran."
anyone would believe you. They'd be like, "No,
really?
you were drinking too much. Like you need to
Well,
calm
here's-
down."
Obviously,
Here's
you
the
guys have
crocodile.
not flown out of the United States very much
Okay.
in some of the more hallowed corners of the world. That is not all that uncommon.
Yeah.
Really?
I know that there was a plane once of coming out of the Middle East and with some religious pilgrims, and someone actually started a campfire in the middle of the aisle to make some ritual tea. The plane caught on fire and crashed. So that's probably not a good idea either.
No, I would not
Yeah,
recommend that.
Let me ask you this: so is it seems like the crew never survives? Is that right?
No, one of those Lanza flights that I told you about, one of those three, it was either the pilot or the co-pilot who survived. And, that's a tough one when you've been flying an airplane and you're responsible for the deaths of, let's say, 90 to 150 people, and you're the one who survives.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Wow. Is flying in a seaplane a little more less dangerous? If you're in a seaplane and the seaplane's going to crash, it's used to landing on the water.
Yeah, a good point. So I don't know of any of these incidents. I do actually know of one other incident where there was a crash into water where there was a sole survivor. And this isn't one that many people have heard about because it was just a flight from, I think it was Fort Lauderdale to Guantanamo. And, Jacksonville. So there was an aviation electronics technician on that flight. Right after takeoff, one of the engines caught fire. The aircraft turned to come back to Jacksonville. Didn't make it. The wing came off about 100, 150 yards from the runway. And this one person who was pulled out of the water holding onto an aviator's bag was the sole survivor. And again, a lot of these stories don't get a whole lot of headlines. I mean, the sad headline in most cases being that most everybody died.
Right. Sure. Yes. Right. But it's still a very, very safe way to travel. Like, I don't like flying, but I think something like 45,000 airplanes take off and land every day around the world. And you don't hear about airplane crashes as much as you used to. so it to me it's a little frightening, but it's a safe way to, just an unusual way to travel, right?
Oh, I agree. I fly, so I mean, I have no qualms about that. But by the same token, since I track long falls of people who have, survived without a parachute, I am never going to be a skydiver, because it would just be the most ironic death ever if the guy who tracked long fall survival, deaths or long fall survivals.
Jim, I wouldn't even get you like a freebie at the tandem jump. You're just spitting, into the eye of the dragon there by anywhere near something like that.
That's fate. Yeah.
But I want to ask. You said there was 3 things, and I only had youth seems to be important. The airline, the record of who you're involved with. I think you could even extend that to the military, because certain militaries around the world probably don't have quite as sterling a record as some of the others. What's the third thing?
Well, no, the third thing was watch out what's in people's carry-on.
Oh, that's right. Excuse me. I missed that.
Yep. They can have alligator luggage, but they can't have crocodiles.
Yeah, you should also take a change of underwear.
True. Why? Okay.
Good safety tip, Club. Thanks. For those that are wearing it, Club says bring a change.
Okay. If you want to talk about irony, I've told this story before. I don't like to fly, but I've travel to Florida many times on the train to visit Lois's family. And I like the train. If you have your own little cabin and everything, it's really a nice way just to not be able to do anything for a couple of days. But at one point we were going to the Boca area, and the train stopped about a half hour early, let's say, from the station. It's just, stay there. Finally talked to someone on the train crew, and they said, an airplane crashed on the tracks up in front of us. And now they're clearing the wreckage. Oh. And all I can say, you talk about irony. How about, the guy who writes about aviation on a train because he doesn't like to fly, but a plane hits the train, and that's the end of it.
That would be ironic.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Raven, do you like flying? Raven?
I will fly if it's absolutely necessary, but I'm a road trip person. And the weird thing is that I've always wanted to skydive. I've always been really, really fascinated with that. The thing for me is once I'm like up in the air, I'm good. It's the overwhelming stress of having to go to the airport and check my bags. And take your belt off, take your shoes off. What do you have in your coat pocket? And it's like, it's none of your business. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, it is, but
it's their business now. Unfortunately,
it's better if you have a crocodile or an alligator and just get in your seat. You know what I mean?
And that's what I'm salty about, is because the last time I tried to fly, they said, "Ma'am, you can't bring this baby crocodile," and I was like, "Well, how am I supposed to?"
Yeah, thank God they didn't check they didn't check your suitcase. You checked with the mummy. Thank God they didn't look at that. God, that would have been horrible.
So Jim, when you're flying, do you tell the person next to you what you do?
I've told these stories to various folks. Honestly, on airplanes, I am usually just wishing that there's nobody going to sit down in that middle seat and I can be by myself.
Oh, but Jim, honest to God, Jim, you have the ultimate shutdown right there. So what do you do?
Right,
and depending on I track air disasters and people, sole survivors primarily that have survived air crashes. I can give you statistics in gory detail. Man, talk about the absolute perfect shutdown.
Really? I'm going to move my seat now.
that would do it. You're right. But normally I'm just saying a little prayer that middle seat's open, which is rarely ever true these days.
Yeah. So,
I always got stuck in the middle because I'm tiny, and they're like, there you go.
I try to get near the window. If I'm on a plane, man, if I'm on a window and if I kind of look out, I feel a little bit better than if I'm, just squeezed in a Greyhound with wings, So Jim, how did you get started on this? How did this become a fascination for you?
Actually, I was living on Long Island, and I came across a tombstone that said Robert Post, New York Times reporter, killed in air raid over Germany, February 26, 1943. He was a member of the Writing 69th, which was a group of war correspondents, including Walter Cronkite, Andy Rooney, that trained to fly with the bombers. And on their first mission, he got shot down in the B-24 44th Bomb Group. And so I decided, I looked around, I thought this is a great story, and I could find nothing written about that. And so I decided to write a book. I published a book called The Writing 69th in 1999. And in the research for that, I came across two stories. One was Nicholas Alchimade. He was the guy was in the tail of a Lancaster, I think, that was on fire and going down. His parachute burned up he turned around in the turret, saw his parachute burning and said, okay, do I want to burn up or would I rather fall to my death? He chose falling. He managed to come down through trees, bushes, snow, survived, had a little whistle around his neck, blew it, and then, lit a cigarette and waited for the Germans to capture him because he figured at that point, I'm not going to run away from anybody.
Yeah, right. Wow.
But there was another story too.
I love it.
Yeah, that was great. There was another story like that. A guy named Joe Jones, who was in the tail of a B-20. I don't know. I guess it was a B-17 tail.
B-17.
Yeah.
Right.
Joe Jones was a B-17 guy, hit by anti-aircraft or German gunfire, split the plane into multiple pieces, but the tail turned out to be relatively airworthy. And so I don't know if it came down like a fallen leaf or whether it flew a little bit, but in any case, he survived. And I saw those two stories and I thought, oh, God, there've got to be more of these. So I created the Freefall research page. That is at greenharbor.com. And I've been collecting stories ever since, got, more than 150 or so. Some of them from World War II, but some of them recreational skydivers, all sorts of other situations, commercial aircraft. And that's how I got going on it.
Wow, that's amazing. Hey, Switch, didn't you tell us once that your wife was in a parachute and she was unable to touch the ground or something because of the updraft?
She went to a parachute school and she went through the training and everything. And then when she went up in the little plane and a bunch of them jumped out, she was in a Russian parachute. And for some reason, the air currents were such that she was actually suspended in air for a while. We could look up and see her, and we could even yell back and forth. And I told her, I said, Sarah, the ground's down here. And you could hear her laugh. And she had some kind of a speaker to communicate with the ground. And they told her, oh, don't worry, the air pressure will equalize or whatever, and eventually you'll come down. And she did eventually come down, which was a good thing.
Yeah.
But it was just bizarre to look up at this parachute just floating in the air.
There's a guy, a military pilot, who wrote a book called The Man Who Rode the Thunder, and he ejected from an airplane at tens of thousands of feet into a thunderstorm and didn't come down for I think it was about 45 minutes. Yes. So in a thunderhead, rain, hail, thunder, lightning, and ended up 45 miles away from where he had ejected. And there are other stories of people who went up because of storm drafts. My guess is that your wife was very petite, and that it may not have taken too much to give her a little bit of lift.
A Russian parachute doesn't make you come down very fast.
Right.
Wow.
Hey, Jim, I want to throw one story into you guys. A good friend of mine jumped out of an F-16 in Germany in the 80s. And as the weather was pretty bad, his wingman was very concerned and started circling, trying to locate him in the weather. And he was absolutely terrified because the chute opened. He separated from the seat. He's coming down the parachute. And he could hear his wingman looking for him in the clouds.
Oh, no.
Coming by at 300 knots. And he said twice he pulled his feet up into his chest. He pulled his legs up into his chest just to not have it go by. And he was really worried he was going to get hit. Another thing he was worried about, of course, was the chute would collapse. That's always a big deal when you get around anything like that. You can get the chute to collapse, and then it doesn't want to open. And ejection seat parachutes are not high performance. They're there to open provide you some cushion coming down. They're not designed to do a lot of great stuff with them. Not like the chutes you see now that are more rectangular, and the special forces teams use, and they can glide with them. They can go, they'll do long distance. They actually can make lift under the right conditions.
Right. The other thing too, Jim, I was going to ask before we end the segment is that a little while ago there was about a month or two or so, there was an incident where two kind of light planes, I think, collided, and one of them had a parachute on it. The plane itself had a big parachute. Now it was like a small plane for sure. And
it was a Cirrus. It was a Cirrus Mack.
And it landed safely. Why? I probably asked this question before. Why don't all small airplanes have parachutes on?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, that technology is relatively recent, but actually before that happened, there were incidents where, for one reason or another, somebody opens their parachute while they're still in a plane or whatever. Planes have come down under parachutes before, not intentionally, like in that situation where it was an emergency and it was actually deployed, but where there was a collision or someone got tangled in the gear or something, or on the tail, and that's how the plane came down. And
wow.
It's amazing, but those chutes will support a lot of weight.
It's mainly weight. It's the penalty for the weight and the cost, Mac. That's the reason why more don't have that capability.
Yeah, right. Wow. So, Jim,
in fact,
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that for a while there, when they brought out the line of airplanes that features that as a safety feature, people were actually kind of being looked at, accused of flying into conditions that they shouldn't have, because they knew that they had the parachute and then would pop the parachute when they got themselves into trouble, where if you didn't have that equipment, you're a little bit more cautious. You wouldn't get yourself into that danger area.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but that sounds like the same line that was used in World War I, because during World War I was right around the time when effective parachutes were being developed.
Right.
And the early feel was, let's not give these to pilots because we want them to fly the plane, salvage the plane, and do everything possible to land. Of course, when these pilots started seeing, their folks going down in flames with no hope of surviving, and seeing, actually, I think the Germans had some of the first effective parachutes first, they were like, I want a parachute.
Yeah, right. Who wouldn't, really? So
big difference, though, in performance between a man-carried parachute and a parachute system with a ballistic projection system on an airplane. There's a huge chunk of change in money and weight that is the reason that there's such a huge penalty on it.
Yep. Makes sense.
Jim, where do people get a hold of you?
So my website is greenharbor.com. So Green Harbor, like the Green Harbor area of Marshfield, which is where I live. And you can also write me at jim@greenharbor.com. You can find that same email on the website. The website includes multiple sections. So there's a part on the Writing 69th. There's a part on the Free Fall Research page. There's a part on the Black Cats of Amherst, which is a World War I ambulance unit that my grandfather served in. So all sorts of stuff like that people can find beyond just the falling stuff.
Right. And what do you do? This is a hobby of yours. What do you do in real life?
Well, I'm semi-retired now. I was a market researcher for many years around the printing industry, and specifically around digital printing. And that stuff comes in pretty handy if you want to self-publish yourself, because there's all sorts of on-demand print technologies. People can buy my books from a place called lulu.com. So there's basically a bookstore set up for Green Harbor Publications, which is my company. And so the market research around the printing industry kind of meshed nicely with my part-time, free time work in doing self-publishing and amateur history.
And you'd want to hear from people who have, maybe stories, anecdotes, or so on and so forth.
Oh, yeah. And I have a questions page, too, which I get all sorts of questions. And some, for example, the most recent question I got, you guys would be interested in this, I think. Somebody asked me, and this wasn't really so much about falling, is whether the idea that if you drop a bullet from a specific height and fire a bullet from a specific height, they'll hit the ground at the same time.
Yes.
Mythbusters actually did that as an episode. But I get questions like that, or questions about like, why do cats survive long falls, or how fast was I falling when I fell off the ladder, or whatever. All of those kinds of things. I've answered 100 questions, and if anybody out there has questions about falling, send them to me at jim@greenharbor.com. I'd be glad to answer them if I can.
Mm-hmm. And if you have a really good news item for Jim, he gets excited when you send it to him, because every now and then we even come out of cover find something interesting on the spectrum of who fell out of something above the surface of the earth.
Even, you guys may have seen this recently. There's a great video of a burning building that the firemen were taking a picture of. It wasn't really a dangerous situation. I think they were just getting the fire out. But there was a cat in like this 4th or 5th story window that leaped out. I mean, did this just amazing dive out, cleared a fence, and landed, and pretty much got up and ran away.
Wow.
Which I think kind of speaks to the amazingness of. But I love getting tips like that for fun stuff. But there have also been a lot of stories about infants who have been crawling around on the 10th floor of their parents' apartment, managed to push their way through or climb over, and somebody's been paying attention, watching, and caught them. So those kinds of stories are really moving and amazing, because it was going to be a total disaster, and just because someone ran and caught this child, they survived.
So what's the answer about the bullet?
Crazy.
The bullet is basically, it is. There's air resistance to deal with, but basically the answer is yes. It depends on how close you really want to say, milliseconds or whatever. But
right.
Yeah.
Right. That's interesting. Well, hey, listen, Jim Hamilton, thanks very much for joining us. Greenharbor.com, right?
That's it.
Okay. If you're interested on people who have survived airplane crashes, the hows and the whys and the why nots, that's a good place to go. So listen, why don't we take a quick break now, and we'll be right back after this. You're listening to Mack Maloney's Military X-Files show here on the Distant Thunder Radio Network. We'll be right back.
Do you know where the world's most secret bases are located? Do you know what spooky action at a distance means? Is there a conspiracy by aliens to prevent us from conquering space? And where is the best place in the United States to see a real UFO? Find the answers to all these questions and more in Mack Maloney's new book, Mack Maloney's Haunted Universe. Visit places you never knew existed: the Phantom Tunnels of Tokyo, the UFO Trail in South America, Hong's Hat, and the very mysterious M Triangle. Mack Maloney's Haunted Universe contains hundreds of reports on ghosts, haunted planes and ships, weird celebrity deaths, mysterious sounds, and a breakdown of every monster in America, state by state. You've heard him talk about it on the radio. Now, get all of Mack's paranormal research in one large volume. Mack Maloney's Haunted Universe, with a foreword by the very famous Wan Wan. On sale now in your local bookstore or on Amazon.com. UFOs are found in Renaissance art, on ancient coins, and etched on cave walls. They're even reported in the Bible. But more surprising is when UFOs are seen the most, in times of war. Through centuries, thousands of UFO sightings have been made by high-ranking officials, military pilots, and ordinary soldiers. Often, these fantastic appearances occur at the height of great battles. From World War I to D-Day, to Korea, Vietnam, and beyond, military investigators are baffled. Why do UFO sightings spike so drastically during wartime? Could it be mistaken aircraft, or is someone, or something, looking in on us? In UFOs in Wartime, What They Didn't Want You to Know, Mack Maloney chronicles centuries of these incredible sightings and tries to solve the puzzle of why so many UFOs are seen while humanity is at war. Read about the scare ships, the ghost planes, and the ghost rockets, alien giants in the jungles of Vietnam, UFOs controlling our ICBM bases, dogfights with flying saucers during the Gulf War, and more. 300 pages of unbelievable stories, along with many startling photographs. That's UFOs in Wartime, What They Didn't Want You to Know, by Mack Maloney. On sale at your local bookstore or on Amazon.com.
I was in the hospital with my son for 18 months. When he got injured, I wasn't prepared, but I knew I had to be strong.
When I was told about John's injury, I was in complete shock. I just remember rushing into his room and giving him a big hug and letting him know I was there.
These veterans and families are just a few of the heroes we serve at Homes for Our Troops. For thousands of severely injured veterans, everyday life is filled with barriers.
It was really the little things throughout the house. Counters that you can't roll up to. I had to drag my wheelchair down steps.
I want to help, but he is so determined.
At Homes for Our Troops, we build specially adapted custom homes with features like wheelchair access, roll-in showers, and automatic door openers that allow them to function independently and focus on their recovery and family.
This house is freedom. It's hope. It's a new beginning.
This house has given me my family back.
To learn more, visit hfotusa.org.
It's early medieval Europe. Norse marauders are pouring down from the north. Steppe riders threaten from the east, and Moorish raiders are surging up from the south. Now, as the Vikings plan an invasion of Ireland, the country's aging king must somehow protect his nation. But who is up to the task? Nordic sagas tell us an obscure and unlikely hero arises to save his people. Wolf of Clontarf leaps into history as a nightmare to the Norse and avenger for the Celts. It's Vikings meets Braveheart as this legendary Irish warrior, some medieval special operations forces, and a young woman spy help the Irish king defeat the Viking invaders. It's a tale spanning 15 years and leading up to the most decisive battle of the Middle Ages. That's Wolf of Clontarf, a new novel from Thomas J. Howley, now on Amazon.
Welcome back, everyone, to Mack Maloney's Military Exile Show here on the Distant Thunder Radio Network. This is Macaroni. Wow, what a show we have for you tonight. Let me quickly introduce the members of the posse. Girls, she's here, the very famous Wan Wan.
Hello, Mac. Hello, girls. Glad to be here. Excellent show so far. Very fascinating with Mr. Hamilton. I love the guy.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yep. I mean, if you have a chance to survive a airline crash, you're listening to the right show.
Well, I was going to ask him.
Also,
you know, when the stewardesses announced that in case of a water landing, your seat can be a flotation device. Is that oversold? You know?
Is that oversold, Jim?
Yeah, I kind of. I don't know. I mean, I watched Sully a while ago, and it was good for those folks to have flotation devices, but
but their plane didn't sink. I mean, we're careful now. Their plane didn't sink. They were all standing on the airplane.
Right.
It's like a raft.
Like a raft. Yeah.
They almost had a picnic on the airplane before they left.
If I'd fallen off that wing, I would have want to have a flotation device. But outside of that situation, I'm not sure it applies a lot.
Yeah, that was your typical water landing, right? Is the way Sully did it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
They teach that in
school.
school.
Watching that on TV. I mean, it was literally live on TV. They said, "Oh, there's a plane in the Hudson River," and it's like, what? And that whole thing was just, broadcast live on
the
TV.
ferry, the CCTV at the ferry terminal at the bridge caught it. Caught the landing.
Yeah, amazing. So anyway, okay, so Wan Wan is here, and middle-aged ladies, it's time for joy because Coco has joined us mid-flight. Coco, how you doing?
Great to be here, Mac. Glad to join the formation. Thank you for the stealth arrival, and it'll probably be a stealth departure tonight. It was, as always, just great to be with everyone. And
all right, the chat room wants to know, how's the pig?
Well, Zeppelin now has a mud bath that has been set up for the very, very hot temperatures. Mrs. Cobra had me get the proper kind of bath. She hand-selected the type of dirt that was going to be used. It was sifted, water was added, and pictures are available.
Oh, man, I got to see those.
On a hot day, he likes to go in, he likes to wallow around, come out, dry, scrape it off, and repeat the process.
Scrape it off.
He's a very happy pig.
Wow. I'd be happy too if that's
Me
what
and
I had to
Zeppelin
do all
have
day.
the same routine. That's crazy.
Really? Okay. Yeah, that was Raven we just heard about. So Raven, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to jump
sorry,
over
Switch.
Switch and Club. But tell us, you do a mud bath? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, and that was very rude of me, and I'm really sorry. But I mean, when you're right, you're right. Zeppelin knows what's up.
And
Visions in
the
my
image
head, I
that you
can't get rid of
provided
it.
for the rest of the guest hosts and guests is fine, Raven. I think everyone will forgive you for jumping in line to talk about
It will
your
last.
mud bathing as they're trying to now come up with the proper pictures.
Yeah, we got to do a segment on
Really,
that.
I think I'm
How's
the
the
only
mud
person
wrestling
here to
going
treat
on?
you as a daughter, Raven. So I'm just going to tell you, knock it off and let us continue the show, please.
Yes, sir.
Listen.
Yes, sir.
Right. Coco, do I have to drive 72 miles to come up and smack you? Yes and no.
If you can do it there, young man, I'll be waiting for you. Just don't trip over the mud bath, okay?
Oh, that big dog you have. So anyway, okay. So Coco is here, also up there in the Battle Creek of the Republic, Battle Creek, Michigan. The home of the Flakes is national correspondent Switchblade Steve Ward. Switchy.
It is great to be here, Mac.
Okay.
Good
All
to
right.
see you, Switch.
Were you educated in how not to survive a plane crash?
Yes.
Okay. Don't
Do you
get on a
mud bathe
plane.
I just
on a
don't get on
regular?
the planes.
Don't get on the plane is the best way to do it.
Which do you mud bathe?
I agree with Raven about all the hassles now. But the last time I was on a plane, I kept going through the thing and kept beeping, and they told me I must have some kind of an implant or something like that. And I just hadn't taken my belt off. I didn't know all the routine. And then I had this bag. They kept putting it through the X-ray machine, and the guy says, "She thinks she sees a knife in there." I think, what is he talking about?
What?
And it turned out it was the bag I would take to work, and I had a knife in there. I used it at work.
Oh,
didn't think about it.
Really?
And it was one that my dad had given me. Not any big deal. It wasn't worth any money. Little sentimentality maybe. But they said, well, you can take it back to your car. Well, our car was back in the other parking lot. We would have missed the plane. So I would go through all this grief and all this hassle. So flying was an absolute pleasure compared to the BS you have to put up
on the
with
ground
just to get on there.
Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah. Take the train is what I do. So also joining us is our security chief, Willy Clubb. Willy, how you doing?
Mac, thanks. It's great being on board here. Thanks for having me. Though I have to get back to Switch because he made a comment about setting off those metal detectors. And, the other thing, Switch, you got to remember is that, the hairpiece you have has a netting and it has that little metal pieces that they tie into, and that'll do it.
But now, Club, look at this.
Unless
look at it, it's flawless. It flows into my real hair.
It is. That's the problem.
A little bit of gray, a little bit of white, but it flows seamlessly into the dirty dishwater blonde. So you cannot tell where the rug begins and the real hair.
No,
right.
I would say, Switch, your hairstyle is catnip for most women. I mean, they just go crazy when they see that. And I just think it's Club who does, too many U-turns under the sheets there, looking at him on the screen here. He's a little jealous. You know what I mean?
I'm impressed. I mean, women rub your fingers through your hair, and as long as it doesn't get caught in the netting. But anyways, I don't want to get like that. Because I really I'm jealous. But I did want to say about Jim, I was very happy. A lot of things Jim said, but now I'm kind of depressed. I've always been more comfortable flying to Europe than domestic because of the ocean effect. But now you've finished that off by saying there's no safety if you fall out over the ocean. And that, I always thought I could survive it because I can swim.
Have you seen Titanic?
Yes.
How does that end?
How does that end? With a plane crash?
I've never heard of that.
Yep. I mean, wet water is wet concrete, I think Jim said at one point. You're going to hit it. It's going to be just as hard, except it's going to suck you in instead of just splatting you. So,
and we're still talking about water, folks. Don't take any kind of drift off the course line.
Let me introduce. So we introduced Raven. Raven is with us tonight. Raven, the beauty among the beasts. She's got a bun on tonight, and her room is on fire once again. So everything is copacetic. Coco is here. Clubb is here. Jim Hamilton, who we were just talking about, how to survive airplane crashes, or people who have survived airplane crashes, joining us. And also, our guest of this segment is Thom Reed. Thom Reed is somebody who is heavily involved in what we know here in Massachusetts as the Berkshires UFO. That's how I know about it. Thom, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. Guys.
Hi.
Okay. All right.
Speaking of
now, Thom, before we get to this, yeah, that's okay. You're in the majority here. So, first of all, is this what you expected? This show?
Oh no, this is pretty cool. I don't think I've ever spoken to 7 people at the same time before. You got some serious bandwidth, by the way.
Okay. Well, we tried.
We might bring down the internet if we go too long here.
Right. So, Thom, just tell us really quick, elevator pitch. What is the Berkshires UFO? When did it happen? Who saw it?
Well, the Berkshires UFO is just a brand name that Unsolved Mysteries gave it. It's the Thom Reed UFO incident, which is in the Roswell Museum, was mentioned at the United Nations on October 2nd, 1992. I'm not quite sure why they branded it the Berkshires UFO, except that there were an awful lot of witnesses, about 250 that saw it that night. But it was interesting, too, because they focused an awful lot on Great Barrington. And the incident didn't take place in Great Barrington. It took place in
the western side of Massachusetts, folks. Western side of Massachusetts.
Yeah, the incident that made history took place in Sheffield. Now, there were an awful lot of things I'd like to talk about with regard to the Unsolved Mysteries episode, but to give you an idea, the radio station WSBS Radio that actually broadcasted that night, 1969, is still there to this day in the same building. And the wife of Tom J., who broadcast it, still lives in town. So
interesting.
Yeah. So when the Unsolved and the rest of them, came in to talk about who was going to participate,
right.
WSBS played a big part in that. And their letter also hangs in the Roswell Museum.
Right.
And with that, the radio station that night was the one who went on the air. The guy came back from home. He was a ham radio operator. Went back to the station and went out on the air asking people to call the station to say, where is this thing? That's why Great Barrington got tied into it.
Okay, so let's set the table a little bit. So what date was it in 1969?
This was September 1st, 1969, about 6 weeks after the moon landing, which is very interesting also because Sprague Electric was the manufacturing facility that was involved in the space race.
Yes.
Along with GE and Command and Pratt, all the rest of them. But they made that goodwill message was made right near our diner. North Adams, Mass is like you could ride a bike there. So when that goodwill message was placed on the moon by Buzz on July 20th, I believe it was, that was just 6 weeks prior to the sightings. And so when a lot of people saw the sightings, the crafts and the spheres, the controversy is what made this case so popular because I hate to use that word, but that's what happened because of the conflict, because those Sprague and GE and a lot of these other manufacturing facilities employed a lot of the locals. So they were working on a secret space program and all these people are talking about UFOs and they could lose their job over it thinking that they spoke too openly about it.
So that particular night, that particular night, what happened? I mean, it was night, and all of a sudden something appeared in the sky, and lots of people saw it.
So let me back up 1 second, though. Before 1969, there were multiple sightings. It wasn't just 1969, but on that particular night, because it was a holiday, you had a lot of people outside, barbecuing and that sort of thing. So a lot of people witnessed this as a group, and a lot of them didn't even know each other. Okay, so we went back to lock up our diner, the Village on the Green Diner, which was in the heart of Sheffield. And right after Melanie Korchdorfer probably saw it over Lake Mansfield, because the crafts, there were three of them, not one, followed the water. So we left, and my mother was taking a shortcut through the Sheffield Bridge, a covered bridge, one of the oldest bridges. At the time, it was one of the oldest bridges in New England. And when we came out the other side, there was a sphere. And I never said it came out of the water. I don't know where it came from. All I know is that it was right from the banks of the Housatonic River. It was probably 60 yards away from us. And as it rose, it kind of paused and fired a couple of rods of light into the water, which formed like a V. So it almost, for a moment, as a child, I referenced things from things I was familiar with. It looked like an ice cream cone.
Oh, wow.
So it fired these lights. They went back up. And then it started to continue down the road or along the road that we were driving on about 15 or 20 miles an hour. It was a dirt road. It's very bumpy. And so we lost it behind a line of trees. It didn't put out a lot of light. It was a self-contained, I've tried over and over to come up with the best descriptions of this thing. It looked like a cue ball from a pool table with a little bit of light. It was solid like that. It wasn't hollow. It didn't seem to be like an orb type of thing. It was a solid ball. And then off to the right, my brother saw a second one, very much like the white sphere that we just saw moments ago, but it was orange. And it was over the water as it went around this turn. The Housatonic River is very windy. And so if you look at the white, the white and orange, left and right of the car, they were almost equal spaced away from us. And so when we drove further down the road, it widened a little bit where cars would pull over because it was a telephone pole there where trucks used to work on the light there or whatever, where the phone wires there.
Okay.
Pulled off to that little spot, and to the left was an opening, a large opening. And that's when we saw what looked like, I don't want to say a typical craft, but it was round and it looked like a turtle shell. The top, I'll never forget this, the top right of it was putting off like a glow to it, almost like the shell itself was emitting a light. It wasn't having like lights. The shell illuminated. And the center of it looked like a snake to me. I mean, it was fat and the top of it, had the markings. I used to originally mention like a turtle shell, but it had lines in it. But the centerpiece was so fat that it was wider than the top and bottom combined. And it just hung there. It just stayed there. Everything went silent like we were underwater. And, it was... How
old were you?
How
old were you?
I was almost 10.
Yeah, okay. All right, so you're not an infant. You're remembering this. You're cognitive. Right?
My mother was driving. My mother was 29. My grandmother was about 50. My younger brother to my right was like 2.5 years younger than me. And I was behind my mother. And this is where it gets kind of weird. But before I jump into that, I want to point something out. So when we first came by the white sphere and the orange sphere and passed them and went down the road and saw this craft, these three pieces formed a diamond, or a pyramid, I should say.
Okay, yes, sure.
We were in the middle of these three pieces. And I think that there was some type of a communication going back and forth that we were in the middle of. Because the way we felt, we got super foggy. Like I said, like being underwater. There was like these little sounds of stones, the tires picking things up. It just seemed way too loud.
Yes.
Like when you're underwater. And then
sensory.
It was very weird. And so
were you afraid? Were you afraid?
No, I wasn't. This is the thing. I wasn't afraid at all. I think we had seen them before, and we had talked about what we had seen before, but nothing like this. Nothing, this was very weird. And I think there was government involved in it, and I want to explain why here in a minute. But when we sat there looking at this craft, I mean, Tom Warner said in the Unsolved Mysteries episode, it was like 50 feet. No, it wasn't. It was like 100 yards. I mean, Jan Green, who used to own the pharmacy in town, my mother used to know her. This thing was huge. And it was like 3 stories. It just hung there. It was like a brown. It wasn't silver. It had like different shades to it. I don't know if that was the color of it or the bleed of light coming through it. And I don't really know what color it was, right? All I know is that the colors coming through the shell looked different. And the right side was very vivid, and the left side was kind of hard to see. And then next thing I know, there was like, an eruption of crickets. There was a flash in the car. And everything just seemed to change, and all of a sudden, bang, everything came to life again. It was like whatever happened affected the life around us. The crickets, katydids, frogs, everything just erupted. And that was basically the last thing I remember from being in the car. I mean, that's, and then.
How long did you have it in sight?
The craft? All 3 pieces? I would say that by the time we were only going like 15 miles an hour, and we had gone maybe 100 yards or so, and then sat there and watched the craft for probably 2 or 3 minutes. So I'm going to say 4 or 5 minutes.
Wow.
Again, we weren't really coherent that whole time either, because we were like, what's going, my mother talks about it too. Like, we've been involved in hurricanes, in Florida. We lived in Florida a long time. And there's that weird barometric change in pressure. And so we're used to that. And that's kind of what it felt like. It felt like all of a sudden this heavy feeling over us and this fog, and then it lifted, but it was instantaneous. And And
right, so listen, when you were looking at it, okay, well, first of all, are there any, what's the military bases? Are there any military bases around there?
Well, yeah, you have, you've got, the Groton Naval Base, and then
you have Westover Air Force Base.
Westover.
Newport Naval Base. You got the nuclear power plant, it was electric boat over on
electric boat, right?
Electric boat
in Groton, right?
General Electric, Pratt and Whitney, Command Aerospace in Windsor, General Electric in Pittsfield, Sikorsky, and Sprague Electric, and I believe the majority of them were all involved in the space race. They were all working on government projects at the time, and they were all around Sheffield, which is one of the highest. I think it's 1,800 feet above sea level. It's and you've got the Nike missile sites, I'm told, are in the mountains over there. You've got the NORAD towers in Pittsfield and Dalton. I mean, so back in the day, it was never a question, did you see something? That's one of the advantages space had over some of the other, more famous cases, if you will, that there was never a question that something was being seen. It was simply a matter of was it? So when my father took it to the UN and lost his life, they decided to do something with it.
Okay, so how many people saw it? Was it this particular night that so many people saw it? This particular night you saw it?
Over 250. But it was 250 from Sheffield. And this was also, mentioned on Ancient Aliens, that the witnesses came from as far as Pittsfield, because they could follow it. The craft actually followed the Housatonic River.
Interesting, yeah.
So it was Pittsfield, Dalton, Lenox, Stockbridge, Egremont, Great Barrington, Sheffield, and it all went to Canaan.
Right.
They went all the way to Canaan.
These are all places, for our listeners, these are all places in far western Massachusetts, almost on the border of New York, is what we're talking about. So, where Raven lives. I mean, the interesting, and we do hear this a lot, and I know Switch will back me up on this, is what we hear a lot is that there are frequently UFO sightings are made around either secret military bases or these military contractors, places that they have, like GE. Sprague was very, very big back then. You name it. I mean, it seems almost a coincidence to think that, you have all this top secret stuff going on, and then this thing shows up. No?
That's not me.
It's not?
No, I'm talking to him. Yeah.
Hey, Mac, can I add to that?
Yes,
that area, the Berkshire Mountains, that's a range of the Appalachian Mountains. And for years, there's been a lot of UFO activity all along the Appalachians. So that's another important thing about that area, the Berkshires,
And the Hudson River Valley. Hudson River Valley. And that's kind of
same thing.
Yes, that's kind of. Can I mention? Oh, by the way, that picture you were showing, that's not me. That was another mistake online. I don't know where.
Really?
What? Yeah. Okay. There was the picture he showed was somebody else from Unsolved Mysteries episode. It wasn't me.
Oh, okay. It was identified as Thomas Reed.
Yeah, that's.
Okay. That guy had hair, Tom. So
No, I did too until 5 years ago. I miss it terribly. It's like, you know how long it took me to not use soap.
Hey, listen, bald is sexy, right, Raven? Bald is sexy. Please say yes.
Please say
I can't in good conscience because of my dad. That's a weird. Yeah, no, sorry.
Her dad is really bald. Okay.
But bald men are adorable. I can say that.
There you go, Tom. Okay. You feel better? Listen, let me ask you this, though. Let me ask you this. So you've been involved with Ancient Aliens. You've been involved with these TV shows, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. First off, how did they approach you? How did they first approach you about this?
Well, it's interesting because I used to own one of the largest model management companies in the state of Florida. I mean, I managed the Miami Dolphins cheerleaders, NFL players.
Whoa. Time out.
Stop
you
there.
were a model manager?
Yeah, I was the founder of the largest model management company in the entire state of Florida.
Models as in beauty models?
Yeah, I had the 5-year packaging campaign for
That's a whole other show there, my friend. Yeah. Go ahead.
I had the 5-year packaging campaign for Love's Diapers. I managed the Dolphins cheerleaders. I worked on CSI Miami for 3 years. I was My Son's in Transporter 2 with Jason Statham. I mean, we were Hoovers listed at almost $300,000 a year by our second year. So
Nice.
I had a 270-pound tiger in my backyard. Yeah. So this all played a part too. So when I got approached by the Historical Society to, would like to pay tribute to your late father who lost his life on October 2nd, the same date this incident was mentioned at the United Nations in support of General Assembly 33426 with Muhammad Rabidin, who was the president of the Parapsychology Society. They also took an interest in my contacts that I had because when you're shooting a movie or something, I wasn't involved in television, but when they're filming in Miami, you want good-looking people in the background, right? So they would use my talent. So I met a lot of people in the business, and so that helped me get attention to this incident when my father was killed.
What happened to your father?
Well, my father was approached by I shouldn't say approached. My father was an attorney and a politician. I don't know if you know that or not. He was
Okay, go ahead.
He was a mayor. And Kevin Titus, who sealed the governor's citation letters, is a magistrate and a judge in the state of Connecticut, who also played a part in getting these documents in front of my dad and the whole bit, because he was a witness to it back in the day. See, let me back up. All these children who saw this back in 1969, most of them still live there. And they're either bankers, judges, historians, lawyers. So when my father lost his life on the same date, which I'll get to in a second, all these other people knew that there was only one common denominator here. And so the attorney that mentioned our case at the UN was Robert Bletchman, who lived in Manchester, Connecticut. His office was on Broad Street. He was also a Democrat and ran in the same circuit my dad did. My dad was backed by Senator Chris Dodd and Governor O'Neill in his run for office. I helped my father run his campaign. And so Robert Bletchman at the time was very good friends with Stanton Friedman and Linda Morton Howe. He was actually the public relations director for MUFON at the time. I didn't know what MUFON was at the time.
Okay.
And so when he organized this United Nations symposium with Muhammad Rabidin, once again, he was the president of the Parapsychology Society at the UN, they wanted a case that they could hang their hat on to add some credibility to the Hudson River Valley cases.
Sure.
And the environment that I guess Cash and Landerman was one that also had this environmental change around their vehicle. So they thought that would be of interest as well. So my father really wasn't going to go anywhere else. He was pretty happy with what he was doing, so he didn't have all these aspirations. So he's like, yeah, sure, you can mention it. Just don't go too far with it. And so they mentioned our case in support of Cash and Landerman and the Hudson River Valley and a couple others. And he came back with all these files and gave them to my dad. And so about 14 years later, my father was writing a book about everything that he got back from the UN. And a lot of these papers and things I've seen are a lot more than the disclosure they're telling you now. My father went to work on October 2nd, went in his office, his head hit the desk. He was rushed to Yale New Haven Hospital and gone. And he was perfect, healthy, and only 54 years old.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And so the CDC came in. They were brought in. The mayor of Bridgeport, Connecticut, was a good friend of my dad's, along with, the Milano family and, a few others.
Okay.
So they, Genovese, Mary Genovese was a good friend of the family.
Okay. Here we go. Yep.
So
it's all coming together now, Mac.
Show there, my brother. But go ahead.
Wow. Alicia Genovese is a good friend of mine. But anyway, Robert Gambino. Okay. Anyway, so my father, the mayor of Bridgeport, looked into my father's passing and called in the CDC, and they shut down the building my dad lost his life in immediately. Then they somehow my mother ended up getting $25,000 not to say anything. And then he had this huge funeral in Milford, and they were busing people in from all over to his funeral, and so with that, what's odd is that Robert Bletchman, our attorney who mentioned this for us, lost his life 8 months later.
What happened to him?
They said it was cancer or something. I don't know.
Well,
then the doctor.
So do you see a connection? Do you see a connection between all this and your father's passing?
Yeah, there's more. And then the doctor who investigated the treatment that my father had. See, now my father, when he went in, he was burning up with a high temperature. So Yale New Haven gave him shots in the legs. Different antibiotics. From Augmentin to Levaquin, whatever. And the more antibiotic they gave him, the more his temperature went up. So they assumed he had a bad infection, when in fact he didn't have an infection at all. He had a fungus in his blood, a deadly fungus in his blood. And so when they gave him the antibiotics, it killed the good bacteria to fight the bad, and it sped up his demise. And so he was gone on the same day. So because he lost his life on the same day, and he had these political connections, the Historical Society decided to kind of pay tribute to my father a little bit, because he was advocating the incident so that everybody in town didn't think they were crazy. So he was doing it in the town, and so the town, or at least some people in the town, wanted to pay tribute to him. And that's how the whole monument came out. They rolled the monument, and then the monument became a park, and people started donating things, and it became a tourist attraction. Then the town wanted to take it over. So
yeah, okay, sure.
That's kind of what happened. I'm sorry.
So when you were contacted by these TV shows, how many TV shows have you been on? How many programs?
Well, some of them I'm friends with. Like, I'm friends with Ben Hansen, and I speak to Osborne Productions now and then, and so I've got some contacts. So I would mention what happened to see if it would, now and then I reach out to them and say that if you find this might be of interest, you're working on something similar, let me know. And maybe a year later they call me back. Other times I'll get a random call. But yeah, I think one of the first shows that we did, first we were on the Fox Morning, Red Sofa Morning Show. And then we were on Good Morning Canada AM. Yeah. That got a lot of attention. And then we were on Discovery Channel's Alien Mysteries. Did a very good job, actually. That was one of the better ones.
Did they pay you? Do they pay you?
No, I don't take payment.
Why?
No. Well,
what?
No, I don't. No, I asked them to give a donation to the park.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, man.
I love that.
I don't need it. I mean, what are they going to give you?
How much were they going to give you? How much would they have given you?
We have a limousine, a Maserati, a $500,000 home. I don't need $500.
You get a Maserati?
Yeah, we just sold it. Actually, I just sold it. We had a Quattraport, white Quattraport, beautiful. It has the Ferrari engine in it. Yeah, I got a brand new truck. I got a $4,000 cat. I had a lot Tiger.
You had one, yeah. Okay.
A hot tub, tanning beds. I don't need,
Okay, you don't need money. All right, good for you.
I didn't say I need it. I'm just saying, just donate it to the park. Put a light in, put a bench in.
Sure.
Because I'm not doing anything for money. I'm not writing a book. I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Selling a
Oh,
book.
don't write a book for money. I know that.
Show.
So listen to me. Listen for a second.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do this to pay tribute to my late father. You know what I mean?
I can understand that.
It's not
Sure.
about giving me $300 to talk to you. You know what I mean?
$300. That's what it is, folks. $300. So let me ask you this though. What do you think it was? What in your mind? What did you think it was? You think it's little green men from Mars? What do you think?
That's a really good question. Okay, so let me tell you what happened after that eruption of crickets and Cadians.
Okay.
After that, my mother, my brother, my grandmother, and I all remember being somewhere that looked very, military by design. It was not what a lot of people describe as being super high tech. These were lefts and rights, tall hallways. Where I was, I remember seeing something lower from the ceiling that looked very industrial. I remember what looked like an autopsy table with a single pole in the middle of it.
So you were abducted? Were you abducted
then?
I could not say I was abducted because, matter of fact, I say I wasn't abducted. I was removed from the vehicle and taken somewhere locally because where I was not the craft. Okay. It was a military type of something. My mother was put back in the wrong place. The car ignition was turned off. That seems to me, that screams, human error to me. That's why.
Let me jump in real quick because I'm familiar with this case, and you and I have talked in the past. One of the things that we kind of delineated was you have never made any claims about the abduction, but you felt that this was obviously on someone's radar, no pun intended, because of the way things were almost improperly staged. When you say the car was turned off, if I remember correctly, we talked about the key ignition being turned off, your mom in the wrong seat, you having these memories of talking to people that seem to project some kind of authority. At 10 years old, you're kind of aware of that, and we're very close in age, the 60s. Obviously, you would know how to respond, the way your parents talked to me the same way as mine. So there's a lot of things that stacked up with this, and that area that you have talked about has long legacy going into the Hudson River Valley sightings that we're seeing, the type of craft that we're seeing. And I've always noticed that the flight characteristics of what you described and what you saw has great similarity to what occurs about 2 decades later in the way the craft flew, how they behaved, and how it doesn't seem to be upsetting to people that it's being seen.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I didn't say that what I saw wasn't off-world, because it most definitely was. But who took us from the vehicle? Now, I get questioned a lot about this because I've this has been researched by a lot of different people and the whole bit. And I got to be completely honest with myself too, because, I take polygraphs and everything else. I'm willing to do that. So part of me says, how do I know what took me out of the car? Because at the time I was out. I didn't see who took me from the car. And being where I was and seeing what looked like an underground facility, like a big airplane hangar type of thing, it was bigger than the craft I saw. So bigger than the craft, seemed military, seemed industrial by design. And I was grabbed harshly on my left arm. It hurt. I'll never forget that. So there was a human element to it. And if there's a human element to it, and we've got all these industrial, military, manufacturing facilities in the area and government, because we went back a minute ago, we were talking about all the companies in the area. Did you know that the magnesium for the atom bomb was also mined from like 3 miles from our diner?
Really, huh?
That went to Oak Ridge? Yeah.
Interesting area, yeah.
There was a magnesium spill there. So there was government underground facilities. They're cleaning that up because they didn't want it to get into the Housatonic River. And that was investigated.
Oh.
You think there's a connection between that, something that you ingested and caused you to hallucinate or something like that?
No, I didn't drink the water. I don't think anybody.
Wow, here we go.
That was like the most toxic water. That was polluted way back from, the paper mills.
Yeah.
Part of that. But a lot of people still fish out of it.
Whoa.
No! Oh God!
So
All I
listen,
can imagine is the fish out of The Simpsons.
Down, they bring
Yeah,
her-
yeah.
I was freaking out. It was I'm like, my God, if Dennis licking the baby's face, I'm like, Jesus, you know.
Oh, come on. Here we go. All right, listen. All right, I'm just gonna ask people around the horn here if they have questions. Switchy, you must have a question. Switch.
The Ancient Alien segment. Remember what year that was, or any idea what season that
Yeah,
was?
it was season 11. It
Okay.
was called The Taken. Matter of fact, if you go to my website, which is ufopark.org, there's a lot of video on there from when the park opened and the people sponsored it, from the links to the Ancient Aliens episode, as well as Unsolved Mysteries and a bunch of others.
Okay.
Right.
So
Did you have any markings on you, or any people talk about scoop marks or and so forth? Was there anything strange about what happened to you afterwards?
Yeah, my brother, first of all, I'll start with that because that was more significant. He had 2 puncture wounds behind his right ear that like 1 centimeter. He had gone to a doctor. The doctor went public, although the doctor's gone too. Isn't that weird? 2 puncture wounds behind here, and he had 2 puncture wounds along the thymus gland. And it was suggested that a needle had gone up and extracted the T cells. The T cells are what help the body fight virus, disease, or whatever.
Right, sure.
When you're older, they dry up. But it was odd that the connection between the 2 puncture wounds behind the ear is the same, basically the trigger for the brain that tells the body how much T cells to produce. So that was Dr. Oh my God, that's actually, you can find that on my website too. I got a link to that too.
Okay.
But that was our family doctor who saw my brother. I've always had like this. I don't know if you can see it. Not your listeners certainly can't. But there's
Radio show. Go ahead.
And there was actually another one right there. So I've got 2 markings in the same spot on both of my wrists.
Interesting. Yeah.
How about
a
pencil eraser?
Mm-hmm. Hey, Jim Hamilton, what do you think of this? Jim Hamilton, outsider looking in.
It's always hard for me in these situations because the long fall stories I hear about, people say that they were saved by the Lord. The hand of God came out and grabbed them. And I feel like, well, hold on, there's got to be another explanation for that. So I'm always looking around for a reasonable explanation. This story is a really tough one because there are a lot of unanswered questions.
Really?
But I still struggle with this because I feel like there's got to be a reasonable explanation somewhere.
Somewhere to all of this, there's going to be someone's going to say, well, it's this. And everyone will go, oh, yeah. But what is it? You know what I mean? What is that all-encompassing explanation?
Well, there was a connection to the Goodwill message. Now, Sprague Electric didn't make the Goodwill message, and then all of a sudden we started seeing activity in the area. Sprague sent the message up because of the activity in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And because 66 and 67, there was an awful lot of sightings then too. And so they, the message went with the flag and they put it on the moon, and all of a sudden people now were tying Sprague with the sightings, when in fact Sprague actually made it originally. Matter of fact, somebody that was interviewed on Yes Theory with me, her father was one of the people that worked on at Sprague on the message, in that department. So Sprague actually made it because of the activity, not the other way around. Yeah.
Wow, man, that's crazy. Hey, Clubb, what do you have? You must have a question or two, Clubby.
Yeah, Tom, one thing, it seems to me like you're alluding that this might be an experimental craft versus some alien kind of thing. Is that true? You feel it was?
No, I think
because you said it wasn't a craft that, I didn't get from you that you thought it was some kind of extraterrestrial kind of thing.
Oh, no, there's nothing that could have moved the way this did, behaved the way it did. It was definitely off-world, but I think that there was government in the area that was right there, with us. There's a lot of people that talk about seeing government come out of the woods with the radios on their sides and, finding a Jeep here and there. And again, we know that there's a lot of government manufacturing facilities in the area, which screams there's going to be, that element anyway. And so we were secluded. We were either at the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time, however you want to look at it. But we were in the middle of these three pieces, and something was taking place. And I think military was there. We had gone out. We were extracted from the vehicle for whatever reason, whether it was alien or government. I don't know. I didn't see that part of it. I do remember an awful lot that has an element of, extraterrestrial to it. So maybe there was something in conjunction. I don't know. But
how did this affect you growing up? How did this affect you as a kid?
That was difficult. I got a lot of fights. I've always been small. I'm still only 5'6", 5'5.5" now that my spine has shrunk too. But
okay.
You know what I mean? And in school, I was probably 130, 140 pounds, so I became a punching bag. But I also learned to, swing for the fences and do what I could and got some thick skin. My brother took the brunt of it, actually, because he was my little brother. My mother was verbally abused to no end. I mean, my mother's idea for that diner was to offer a judgment-free area for the locals to come and talk about it, because you really couldn't talk about this outside the walls of the restaurant, because a lot of people work for they were the employers, these manufacturers.
Right, yeah.
And so you can't go around talking about, hey, my dad's working on a UFO program. It's a secret space, part of the secret space race, right? So in a restaurant, though, you could talk whatever you wanted. But we didn't know when we first moved there that all this was going on in the Berkshires. We were basically in from New York. So we were outsiders. My mother was 29, two single boys, driving a gold Mustang, and here we are in the country with a lot of their relatives working for hanging on by a thread for their jobs at these manufacturing facilities, and now we're talking about UFOs, what can get them fired. So there was a lot of fights in our diner. Fights would break out, push and shove situations, and my mother doesn't understand why. So we're like, you can talk about whatever you want in here. So the diner was this judgment-free area for the children and the locals to discuss what they wanted. And the UFO park became an extension of that. It's a judgment-free park. It doesn't have to just be UFO, whatever it means to you. Whatever struggles you've had, whatever problems you've had, that park is a judgment-free park. And it's actually on private land. So if anybody wants to start anything with it, they can, we can remove them permanently from, through a court order.
Right.
That's
wow.
And so that's really what our case is about, was paying a tribute to my late father. What we were involved with to this day, I'm not 100% sure.
Right.
But
a lot of people say that. I mean, that's how a lot of people feel. They get into these situations and they don't have the answers at the end of the day. They just know something happened. We don't know what it is. Maybe someday we'll figure it out. But man, that's quite an experience, Thom. That is really pretty far out.
It became the first UFO case in America to be deemed historically true. Did you know that?
Wow. Yeah. So
that's pretty amazing, right there.
Crazy.
No, it was inducted into the United States through the Historical Society, a lieutenant governor, the governor, and it was sealed by a judge in the 30th District Court. This case is their first UFO incident to be deemed historically true in America. And Fox News just discussed it. This was the original letter from the governor. I know your listeners can't see it.
Showing us a form here from the governor. Yep.
All right. That's a formal citation.
That's cool.
Sealed by a judge in the 30th District.
Yeah. That's really unusual. Yeah.
There's more. This is just one of four. So this ended up getting some bad press by the same journalist who was knocking the park and the incident, Terry Cowgill, in the area about the monument. Okay. What he never mentions that this one, the second one, was issued 2 weeks later, in November.
Okay.
The reason being, the first one did not have a date of incident, and it was reissued 2 months later in history.
Okay, in the couple minutes we have left, why would anyone knock this? Why was anyone knocking it?
There's the letter from the Historical Society.
Right.
We really don't know why Terry Cowgill would do that. He mentioned that the monument was on town property, which it wasn't. The town installed the monument. Nobody else had anything to do with that monument. You can't just go into a town and put a 5,000.
So what's his problem? What's his problem then? Why is he against this?
We don't really know. his family's known my family from way back when. It's probably an old,
grudge.
Yeah, something like that.
Wow, people got time on their hands. So listen, how do people get in touch with you? Where can we see you on TV?
Well, the best program to cover this incident is running right now. It's Travel Channel's Alien Cover-Up. And it talks about the crop circles that are appearing in the areas. It talks about our case, the governor. It talks all about it. Travel Channel's Paranormal Declassified Alien Cover-Up is by far the best.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would also say Yes Theory did a fantastic job on YouTube. It got 3.5 million hits in 60 days. The Unsolved Mysteries episode is probably one of the worst because it just doesn't have anything other than the flight path.
Okay.
I mean, it shows some of the other people that saw it, but it doesn't talk about the facts. It doesn't talk about how it went to the UN. It doesn't talk about the death of my father. It doesn't talk about the government citations. It doesn't talk about anything.
Wow.
Tom, what was that YouTube one again?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
Your certification, it took almost 50 years to get that. What did you do to enable that to be accomplished?
I had nothing to do with getting it. I got contacted by the Historical Society after after my father's passing. And if you go to my website, ufopark.org, you can play the interview by ABC News New York. The correspondent was Heather Culver. She came in to cover it because of the passing of my father. It was a political person. And the Historical Society thought, well, we might have something here. Tom had some connections back in the day. Would like to pay tribute to his father and to bring this in and get this, have it go through a census to be voted in as something historically true. They had to do all this research, and they got the archives from the radio stations. They got the old documents from this, the United Nations Symposium, the passing of my father. I took a polygraph test. I had to have a lawyer authenticate and validate these forms that were all submitted. It took 2 years for them to induct it. And then the Boston Globe came in and covered it. And I was on the cover of the Boston Globe twice in 3 years for making U.S. history. Yet you don't hear a lot of other people talking about our case when it has all this. Right now, we're proud to be part of this disclosure. I mean, right now, we're at a time when this case means something, and I'm proud, and I think my father would be proud to have finally played a part in wherever this goes from here on out. But we played a part in disclosure, and we're proud of that.
Right. Well, that's great, man. You're part of history. I mean, you're literally part of history.
Yeah, we are. And I think that's why mainstream, gets behind us so much. You don't hear a lot of, basically we have more mainstream support than anything else.
Right.
I mean, you're at a Mass, right?
What? Yes.
You're in Massachusetts? Yeah.
We live in Eastern Massachusetts, yes.
Yeah, there you go. There was a fantastic article in Upcountry magazine that addressed a lot of this. I don't know if you saw that, but that's a fantastic article.
Very polite, yes. So how do people get in touch with you?
ufopark.org. I mean, that's our website.
ufopark.org, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, UFO ufopark.org or berkshiresufo.com, either one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a famous case, and we've been waiting to have you on, and I know this took a while, but I'm glad that you joined us. It's just fascinating. I can't imagine going through this as a kid. Would you do it over? If you had a choice, would you do it again?
Yeah, that's a really good question because, to be quite honest with you, it changed our lives, all of our lives.
Right.
I wouldn't be talking to you, I think I would do it again because anybody can have a modeling agency, right? Anybody can have, own a diner, but not anybody can play part in history. And for that, I'm just, wow. My father's loss, I mean, that broke our family up. My father passing, we were really close. Aside from that, I think I'd do it again. I mean, I'd rather be part. Nothing good comes easy, right? And this has been a battle for us. But we got some skin. We're New Englanders. We don't roll over. So
fight the good fight. Fight the good fight. Hey, listen, will you come on another show and tell us what it's like managing the Miami cheerleaders? What's that like?
The Miami Dolphins cheerleaders.
Profile.
Yeah, I've got.
Okay.
Matter of fact, a lot of all that stuff's on my site too. You can see the letters. You can
pictures. Got pictures.
not for the general public. No,
videos. Oh, that's all.
No, I'm kidding. Okay. No, it was. I met a lot of them. A matter of fact, I got quite a few of them on the Miami Vice with Jamie Foxx and Colin Farrell.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I worked on.
Cool, man.
I worked on
a movie.
I actually worked on.
Is that a video game?
Survivor for castings. Yeah, that's what we need. A UFO Park video game.
Yeah. Wow, man, you lead an interesting life there, my friend. That is really a crazy story.
For real.
I own a limousine company now.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Rolling Zone Limo. Yeah.
You clean the seats every time it goes out. You clean the seats afterwards.
We're pretty careful who we put in the back.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's what I've been told. But watch what happens in the back. Yeah. Hey, Thom, listen. Thanks for joining us. Thom Reed, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Let's give a round of applause.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Commander, I'd love to talk with you further about that. I know it's been a long time since we did a radio show together, but
well, we'll do it
always
again.
Good to see you, Thom. And like I said, living history and getting that perspective is pretty rare.
Yeah, really. Yeah. You made history. That's great. Hey, so listen, JJ, let me throw it to you. What do we got time-wise there, my brother?
We got about a minute and a half left.
Okay, good. So just time to do the plugs.
Yeah.
Let's just do the plugs really quick. Home for Our Troops. Homes for Our Troops is a military charity of the show. Go on to Google them. They build houses for veterans who lost limbs in the Iraqi and the Afghan war. They make it easier for them to get around. And then when they're finished, they give them the keys. No mortgage, nothing. They deserve it. HomesForOurTroops.com. Go and check them out, please. Give what you can. A donation, 88 cents of every dollar goes to our troops. It's one of the highest paying military charities there are. Also, our friend Ross Sharp and his Mad Englishman friends putting back together a warplane from World War II, the Mosquito, made of wood, 2 Rolls-Royce engines on it, fastest thing in the air for a long, long time. They're rebuilding it, and Juan has volunteered to take the first civilian ride in it without a parachute, Jim Hamilton. Without a parachute.
Oh. Any advice on me?
There you go. That's what we all said. Anyway, I'm sure. Hey,
Jim ought to go with him.
It's really hard to wear a parachute in the bomb bay.
Do I have time to say one more thing?
Go ahead, Thom.
Okay, so a lot of people wonder what happened with the monument. The monument was actually, removed. But it was replaced. It was replaced by a new park sign donated by TV's Ancient Aliens. Now, if you know that or not, but Ancient Aliens gave us a donation because the nonsense with the monument.
Yeah.
And it was at the new centerpiece, the sculpture, was actually made by a movie director in Hollywood's brother. Now, many of you might have seen Bats with Lou Diamond Phillips or Beast Among Us. Louis Morneau. Louis Morneau flew me down. I met Louis Morneau in LA. His brother who's an artist, sculptor, made the entrance sign for the park by the money donated by TV channel's Ancient Aliens.
Nice.
Oh, cool. That's nice. That's nice. And just give everyone real quick the location of the park in case they want to go see it. Where is it?
It's right in downtown Sheffield, Massachusetts.
Sheffield, Massachusetts.
Right.
Yep.
It's near the old covered bridge, which was now, after it burned down in 94, they've redone it. So now you can walk across the bridge. It's right on the Housatonic River. Again, Sheffield, Massachusetts, near the old covered bridge. The website is UFOpark.org.
You'll find it.
And I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was a lot of fun. And
thanks, Thom.
Thanks. Anytime, my friends.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll have you back on. Jim Hamilton, thank you very much for joining us. Jim?
My pleasure.
Okay. All right, we'll talk to you soon, too, okay? All right, let's have a round of applause.
Thank you, Jim.
Wish we were sweeten up. Raven, thank you for joining us, Raven.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, this is fun.
Did you enjoy it? Did you learn something?
I did. I learned a lot. And I got to geek out over my pop-up mummy book. So
there you go. The mummy was mentioned.
Good night.
Yes. Okay.
Good night.
Club, thank you for joining us, taking time out from your pool.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. This is an excellent show tonight. I learned so much.
Yeah, this was really cool. Yeah. This was really cool. Thank you. Switchy, of course. Thank you, Switcheroo.
My pleasure.
get something good next week, okay, please?
Okay, will do.
The frosted flakes get a little soggy, if you know what I mean.
Let's get back to the frozen waffles.
Please, at least, okay?
Ooh,
if not, the Grand
waffles.
Slam at Denny's.
So good.
Coco, thank you, Coco.
As
Coco,
always.
thank you. Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Juan, thank you.
You betcha. My best
For
to
running the
Lois
show tonight,
Lane.
for driving tonight. Thank you. And thanks for everyone out there listening to us. We're a podcast now. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on about 28 different
You're everywhere.
platforms. Just Google us and you'll find us. Thank you to everyone out there in the internet radio networks too. And this is Mac and the entire gang. Until the next time you hear us, be safe, be happy, and
Bye-bye.